Who is the most popular NPC in Soulsborne? I'm Billy S, and I spent the last 2 months rigorously polling my community tab in the most convoluted tournament you've ever seen, and the results are in. Taking 8 characters from each of the current Souls titles for a grand total of 64 NPCs, I covered all of my bases, picking a wide range of fan favorites to what the fuck picks that I was morbidly curious about. We also caused a full controversy by including the original 8 Nightfarers from Elden Ring Night Reign, but on a technical level, when you're not actively playing as one of them, they do end up as NPCs in the Roundtable Hold. Spoilers, they're not going to do very well, so just bear with us here. The first stage of the poll saw me randomize all 64 NPCs into groups of 4. Every 24 hours, I'd post a different group onto the community tab, and after those 24 hours were up, the top 2 vote getters would move on to the second stage. For now, we're going off of first impressions, so let's knock some NPCs out of the running, shall we? Bracket A saw Eileen the Crow and the Erden Chapel Dweller from Bloodborne face off against the Fair Lady from Dark Souls and Yuria of Londor from Dark Souls 3. In a clear landslide, Eileen won the poll with 60% of the votes, followed by the Fair Lady with 17% of the votes. Yuria of Londor's 13% and the Chapel Dweller's 10% mean their run is already over. Bracket B saw the Revenant and the Guardian from Night Reign face off against Hanbei the Undying from Sekiro and the Emerald Herald from Dark Souls 2. With 65% of the votes, the Emerald Herald bare seek lests her way into round 2, alongside the Revenant's 15%. I was more shocked that Hanbei came in third with 12% to the Guardian's 8%, but I have to remember that I'm one of the few people that actually likes the Guardian. Bracket C saw Melina from Elden Ring and Basket Weaver Shosuke from Sekiro face off against Patches and Solaire of Astora from Dark Souls. Now, prior to the starting of this tournament, I asked my viewers who they thought was going to take it all out of my 64 NPCs, and Solaire was considered the fan favorite, and this reflects in his score. 63% of the votes, with Melina commanding a strong second place with 23% of the votes. Patches got a lovely 12%, and my king, Basket Weaver Shosuke, got 2% of the votes. You just can't understand his majesty, I'm afraid. Bracket D saw Siegward of Katarina from Dark Souls 3 take on Alfred from Bloodborne, and Emma and Kuro from Sekiro. Of these 4 characters, there was a clear winner, Siegward with 74% of the votes. But the second place character, I couldn't intuit on my own until I saw the results, as Emma survived with 15% of the votes to Alfred's 6% and Kuro's 5%. Bracket E was a battle of the obscure, as Laddersmith Gilligan of Dark Souls 2 took on Ariana, Woman of the Night from Bloodborne, Wilder from Night Reign, and Mephistopheles from Demon Souls. I guess I shouldn't be shocked that Ariana went through with 43% of the votes, as she has a game-long storyline in Bloodborne, but I was pleasantly hyped to see Laddersmith Gilligan make it through with 28% of the votes. Wilder was close with 24%, but this is only the beginning of the downward trend Night Reign would have moving forwards in this tournament. Mephistopheles getting 5% isn't a shock. I think if more people played Demon Souls and had the opportunity to meet her, she could be a dark horse. Everyone loves a baddie, and if you want to see me interact with her, check out my Demon Souls Platinum Run video I posted earlier last month. You know you want to. Bracket F was a slaughter, as I'd argue all 4 of these characters would have survived a bracket if they weren't up against each other. We have Hawkeye Goch and Sigmar Katarina from Dark Souls, the Maiden in Black from Demon Souls, and the Firekeeper from Dark Souls 3. 2 level up maidens, a 360 Calamite no-scoper, and the OG Onion Knight. But with 52% of the votes, Siegmeyer of Katarina was the clear winner here, with the Firekeeper getting a 28% to go through to the next round. Goch got 13%, and the Maiden in Black only got 7%, RIP my queen and RIP my king. Bracket G saw Henri of Astora from Dark Souls 3 take on the Recluse from Night Rain, Patches from Demon Souls, and Alsana from Dark Souls 2. I had a suspicion on who would win. Henri with 54% of the votes for their in-depth storyline, of course, but I didn't see Patches from Demon Souls coming in second with 27% of the votes. Alsana came in third with 10% of the votes, while the Recluse bottomed with 9%. It was clear by this point that people wanted the Night Rain characters out, because in any other poll, I think Recluse does way better than this. Bracket H had Roderica from Elden Ring against Simon from Bloodborne, the Executor from Night Rain, and my personal favorite NPC in the franchise, Lucatiel of Mirror from Dark Souls 2. And you guys agreed, as Lucatiel won with 51% of the votes, followed closely by Roderica with 34% of the votes. Simon and the Executor got 10% and 5% respectively. Bracket I saw the Raider from Night Rain, Gilbert from Bloodborne, Unbreakable Patches from Dark Souls 3, and Yuria the Witch from Demon Souls face the viewers. I specified that Dark Souls 3 Patches also includes his Lap character from the DLC. It is him, he's just in a different outfit, and he swept the poll. 61% of the voters loved him. Second place went to Gilbert with 16% of the votes, Yuria missed out just barely with 15%, and the Raider was banished to You Are Not an NPC Hell with 8%. Bracket J saw Selen from Elden Ring, Iron Eye from Night Rain, and Black Hat Badger from Sekiro face off against the most powerful being in Dark Souls 2. A cat. Sweet Chalquois dominated with 46% of the votes, while Selen rounded out the top two with 35% of the votes. Black Cat got 11%, Iron Eye got 7%, and we all pet the cat. I'm happy Selen survived round 1 though. She was the last NPC I added in the Elden Ring category as a purely personal pick. I know I should have picked Egon, and he is a glaring omission to this poll. I will make it up to you all, just trust me on this. Bracket K saw the Doll from Bloodborne take on Big Hat Logan from Dark Souls, Kotaro from Sekiro, and Stockpile Thomas from Demon Souls. We all knew the Doll was going to sweep at 67% of the votes, but I thought Thomas had a shot for second place. I was so wrong. Logan came in second place instead with 23% of the votes, and Kotaro beat Thomas too with a 6% to 4% split. But you know what? Stockpile Thomas, you are the winner in my heart, and anyone who has played Demon Souls, you know that he is truly one of the best. Bracket L. Great. Saw Tiolier from Elden Ring take on Melentia and Gavlan from Dark Souls 2, and Estrava of Boletaria from Demon Souls. I picked Tiolier and Sir Ansbach as the Shadow of the Erdtree representatives for this poll because they're the two characters who back you in the endgame if you beat their quest lines, which I think is fair reasoning. But it ended up being Gavlan who took home first place here with 44% of the votes. Tiolier came in second with 29%, Poor Estrava got 19%, beating Melentia's 8%, but it's very clear that Demon Souls is getting decimated here. Bracket M saw Rani from Elden Ring take on the Giant of the Undead Settlement from Dark Souls 3, Lautrec from Dark Souls, and Garl Vinland from Demon Souls. Rani was the clear runaway winner with 72% of the votes. She's one of the most popular Elden Ring characters, I'm not shocked. But the Giant getting second place with 16% was a gag. Good on him, good on him. Lautrec's got a lot of haters at 8%, but Garl Vinland, bless him, only 4%. Bracket N saw Blythe from Elden Ring, Grey Rat from Dark Souls 3, Adela the Nun from Bloodborne, and Ben Hart of Jugo from Dark Souls 2 battle it out. This was very much a hydrogen bomb versus 3 coughing babies. Blythe dominated with 65% of the votes, and Grey Rat came in a nice second with 24% of the votes. We love a man who scavenges for us. Ben Hart got 8% of the votes, and Adela deservedly only got 3% of the votes. Moving on. Bracket Enye, because we love a little bit of Spanish flair, saw Hawkwood from Dark Souls 3 take on Sir Ansbach from Elden Ring, Sparkly the Crow from Demon's Souls, and the Duchess from Night Rain. Sir Ansbach being a recent Giga Chad meant he won the bracket with 57% of the votes, while Sparkly came in second with 24%. I didn't see that coming. But the Duchess only got 11% and Hawkwood got 9%. I doubt people even remember who he is. Maybe I should have put Cirrus there instead? And finally, Bracket O saw Alexander from Elden Ring face off against the Divine Child of Rejuvenation and the Sculptor from Sekiro, and Andre of Astora from Dark Souls. This was the closest bracket between first and second place, as Alexander won with 45%, while Andre came in second with 44%, leaving just the Sculptor at 8% and the Divine Child at 3%. Not a shocking outcome, but I'm pleasantly surprised to see how popular Andre was. So, with the first stage complete, we cut the field in half. 32 NPCs remain. What can we glean from all these polls, though? First, let's look at the survivors. Each game had 8 NPCs representing them, and Elden Ring still has all 8 of their NPCs. They survived. Dark Souls 3 still has 6 of their NPCs. Dark Souls 1 and 2 have 5 of their NPCs. Bloodborne has 4 of their NPCs, Demon's Souls has 2 of their NPCs, and both Night Rain and Sekiro only have 1 NPC remaining. What this tells us is that people didn't buy my Night Rain NPC argument, and I respect that, but also that Sekiro has some of the most forgettable NPCs in the franchise, even more so than Demon's Souls, which, due to that game's exclusivity, is almost certainly the least played of the Souls games. I do think that if I had included the Tengu of Ashina, or Ishin when he's drinking sake in his bedroom, maybe Sekiro would have had an extra NPC survive round 1, but I tried to avoid the overlap between NPCs that become bosses later on. The only one that I made an exception for was Garl Vinland in Demon's Souls, and you guys voted him out immediately. Elden Ring and Dark Souls 3 having the most survivors is also pretty accurate to fandom tastes, I feel. I also took a look at the gender disparity. I was genuinely curious. Now, for the purposes of this poll, Sparkly the Crow's gender I believe is unknown, and Henri's gender is determinant, so those two will have their own subcategory. We started with 38 male characters, 24 female characters, and the 2 I just mentioned. That's a 59.3% male split to a 37.5% female split, with the other 2 representing a 3.2% split. After the first round, though, we only have 16 men, 14 women, and the 2 genderless remaining. 42.1% of the men survived, while 58.3% of the women survived. 22 men were eliminated in round 1, and 10 women were eliminated in round 1. Ladies, it's looking good for you. Now we move on to the second stage, where I re-randomize the 32 surviving NPCs to compete in another round of 4-person polls. Our goal is to find the top 16 NPCs who will then go into a proper 1v1 tournament-style bracket. It's time to cut the wheat from the chaff. Round 2, Bracket A, sees Roderica, Grey Rat, Sigvard, and Patches from Demon's Souls facing off. Again, Sigvard of Katarina conquers this bracket with 67% of the vote. He is a popular character based on a popular character from one of the most popular Souls games. He was always going to make it through. Alongside Roderica, who scored 16% and keeps the Elden Ring faction intact. Grey Rat scored 12% and Demon's Souls Patches scored 4%. I'm not shocked. Roderica is a spirit tuner, so you see a lot of interactions with her in Elden Ring. Greyrat is beloved, but just not to the same extent as our top two here, and Patch's Demon Souls is barely a footnote in that game. Bracket B sees Iron Fist Alexander, Gilbert from Bloodborne, Henri of Astora, and Gavlan go toe-to-toe. This one was gonna be a no-brainer. Alexander and Henri are the most fleshed out characters, and with 61% and 21% respectively, they easily move on, knocking out Gavlan's wheeling and dealing with 13%, and Gilbert stays behind his window with 5%. Bracket C though, that was where things got wild. The Doll, Sir Ansbach, Big Hat Logan, and Lucatiel of Mirror all faced off. The Doll was the clear winner with 45% of the votes, but the gag came when Ansbach and Lucatiel both tied with 22% of the votes. Now, fun fact about YouTube polls, they don't actually give you the exact numbers in those percentages. That's all I get. So, I made the executive decision to let both of them go through. It just meant that one of the 1v1s in the top 16 was about to become a 1v1v1. Poor Logan though, 11%, he had no chance. Bracket D, we had the Fair Lady, Melina, Blythe, and Laddersmith Gilligan go up against each other, and it was another Elden Ring sweep. Blythe with 43% of the votes, and Melina with 37% of the votes absolutely dominated. The Fair Lady got a nice 14%, and Gilligan ended at 6%. At this point, I was wondering if half the top 16 was just gonna be Elden Ring, they were so powerful in the polls. Bracket E featured Sweet Chalcois, Emma, Sparkly the Crow, and Siegmeyer of Katarina. Again, the Onion Knight prevailed, with 61% of the votes going to the original Dark Souls Onion. But the battle for second place was brutal. We had two divas going head to head, but Emma eventually took home the win with 19% of the votes, eliminating Sweet Chalcois with 16% of the votes, and Sparkly was there, 4%. But with Sparkly out and Patches gone in bracket A, Demon Souls has officially left the building, while Emma clung on with Sekiro by the skin of her teeth. It's that one meme of the backpack that's barely hanging on by a thread. Bracket F, we have Andre of Astora, Eileen the Crow, Solaire of Astora, and Sorceress Selen. I think all four of these characters are beloved, and three of them have fun questlines that I really enjoy and care about, but the two that survived were the two I predicted. Solaire of Astora with 61% of the vote, and Eileen the Crow with 18% of the vote, which means Andre of Astora's 15% and Selen's 5% were not enough. We finally have our first Elden Ring casualty. I'm not shocked it was Selen out of all of them, but she had a good run. Bracket G saw the Revenant, the Emerald Herald, Dark Souls 3 Patches, and Rani face off against each other. And I felt so bad for this matchup because I saw the writing on the wall. Rani sweeps with 50% of the votes, the Emerald Herald took second with 29%, killing off poor DS3 Patches, arguably his most interesting incarnation in the series if you include the Lap questline, knocked out with 17% of the votes, while the Revenant was finally expunged from the poll with 3%, killing off Elden Ring Night Rain. Lastly, we have Bracket H, Ariana, the Firekeeper, Tiolier, and the Giant of the Undead Settlement. This is where I started to get confused. I knew Firekeeper was gonna win with 65% of the votes. She's been one of the most popular level up maidens for years, full on waifu energy. But I had no idea people were so ride or die for Ariana, who scored 15% in second place. The Giant landed with 11%, and Tiolier baby-girled his way out of the door with 9%. From 32 to 17 at the end of Stage 2, we lost 10 men, 4 women, and Sparkly the Crow, leaving the gender disparity for the top 17 as 10 women, 6 men, and Henri, who can be either. What does this tell us? Quite simply, female characters are more popular in the Soulsborne series than the men overall, But what's more interesting is that a majority of the women who remain in play are often featured in roles of support that help the protagonist. Your level up maidens and equipment maidens like Melina, Roderica, Firekeeper, Emerald Herald, the Doll, Ariana, and Emma. Eileen and Lucatiel fill the niche of badass independent women who can keep up with you in a fight, and Rani is tied to the biggest ending in Elden Ring, which makes her more important to the plot, while the men all, weirdly enough, fit the same overall archetype. Jolly cooperators who you form a tight bond with, but many of which have tragic undertones tied to their questlines. Blythe, Siegmeyer of Katarina, and Solera of Astora all have genuinely sad endings, while Ansbach, Alexander, and Siegvard all have bittersweet endings, where they get to achieve what they wanted, but ultimately die either in the process or after their quest concludes. I would say Henri also fits into this archetype, and let's not forget you can marry them, which adds a whole other layer to the proceedings, especially when you consider that a majority of Soulsborne players are men, meaning female Henri is likely the far more popular choice than male Henri. As for which games remain represented, Elden Ring has 6 NPCs, Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 have 3 NPCs, Dark Souls 1 and 2 have 2 NPCs, and Sekiro has 1 NPC. Night Rain and Demon Souls were both completely cleared out in the last round, as we move on to the top 17 tournament. I randomized my 17 final NPCs one last time into this tournament bracket where they will remain in position until we find a winner. This is our bracket, starting with Roderica versus Sir Ansbach. Elden Ring is now forced to cannibalize itself, but I agree with the outcome here, as Ansbach wins the battle with 59% of the votes to Roderica's 41%. Roderica is a lovely character, but once she enters the Round Table Hold, you don't really see her as often, and her questline is primarily tied to Blacksmith Hugh. Sir Ansbach, meanwhile, plays a critical role as one of your main supporters in Shadow of the Erdtree. He's willing to lend a hand and even help Freya, despite knowing they'd be on opposite sides soon after. He forgives our player for our hand in Mohg's death, and even seeks to avenge his fallen master alongside us when we all discover the truth. He sacrifices his life to achieve that goal, and I genuinely think he is my favorite character from the DLC. Next up is Rani the Witch versus Iron Fist Alexander. This was a brutal back and forth between the pair, with just 2% separating them when the dust settled. But Rani the Witch came out on top with 52% of the votes to Alexander's 48%. You could easily make a case for either of these two to progress here, and I would understand. Rani is directly tied to her own ending, with a questline that spans throughout the first 2/3 of the game. You even end up putting a ring on it at the end, which means nothing to me, but will make certain voters go feral, I'm sure. Alexander, though, is such a fascinating character. He wants to become stronger, but he exists in such a fragile body. He seems so jovial on first meeting, but then you catch him eating body parts at the Radahn Festival, and the rest of his journey is about him tempering his body only to eventually realize he was never strong enough to defeat us. If he made it past Rani, he definitely makes the semi-finals and has a strong chance at making it to the top 2 of the entire tournament, but it wasn't meant to be. Siegvard of Katarina faces off against Melina next. While I do think Melina's overall story is better written, and her moment of sacrifice at the Forge of the Giants is a beautiful send-off to her character, I can't deny that I really do love Siegvard's energy. His questline isn't the most exciting, very much hinging on that final cutscene where he emerges into Yorm's arena alongside you, second Storm Ruler in hand. I love fighting the demon with him in the Undead Settlement and having a Siegbrow and Irithyll, but rescuing him from his cell in that dungeon or getting his armor back from Patches is quite a low point in Dark Souls 3 for me. But hey, if you like that positivity, Siegvard is very much your type of character, as he was with the voters, getting 75% of the votes to Melina's 25%, and we'll have more to say in the quarterfinals. Then we had Siegmeyer of Katarina from Dark Souls putting down Emma from Sekiro. I'm not even gonna hype this up. 78% to 22%. Emma was never making it out of this first round. I don't think there was a single matchup aside from maybe Ariana that Emma could have won here. She's a fascinating character and has more layers to her than you first expect, but she was up against a titan. The tragic story of Siegmeyer has resonated with people the world over. But what that means is that in the quarterfinals, it is going to be Katarina Knight versus Katarina Knight. I can't wait. Skipping to the other side of the bracket, we have Blythe the Half-Wolf versus Eileen the Crow. I love both of these characters, but it's clear that they're both reaching their ceiling in terms of popularity among my voters. Eileen barely made it through round 2 thanks to Celeste sucking up all the votes, and Blythe ends up taking her out with 57% of the votes here to her 43%. He is the more interesting character from a pure story perspective, but I will ride or die for Eileen just oozing the style that Bloodborne is known for, and her storyline is fascinating, how she has to fight people who were once her allies as a hunter of hunters, but Blythe and his dedication to Rani keeps him in the fray for another round. Then we move on to the Emerald Herald, trying to fight Solera of Astora. I was heartbroken to see this matchup so early because I love them both. The Emerald Herald, though, also hit her ceiling here. She's a character whose story was unfinished because of the changes made to Dark Souls 2 during development. Meanwhile, Solera is not only a fully realized character, but also the most synonymous NPC of the series. He has an amiibo, and made Praise the Sun into a universal gaming gesture. 80% to 20%, the Herald is not there seek lesting anymore. Oh look, another hydrogen bomb versus coughing baby. The doll fucking murdered Ariana with 86% to 14%. What a knockout! If anything, I felt kind of vindicated as I truly do not understand how Ariana survived this long. But how fitting is it that it was the other Bloodborne rep taking her out? The doll is one of my favorite NPCs in the series, as her story is low-key, but extremely well-crafted. She's always there for your hunter, but that's how she was designed by the dream. Those fleeting moments where you get her to crack by finding the comb, or defeating Lady Maria, just give her a nice amount of depth that I really love. And lastly, we have the 1v1v1 of Henri, Lucatiel, and the Firekeeper. I knew who was going to win this bracket when I saw the lineup. The Firekeeper is just popular, 52% of the votes, to Lucatiel's 33%, to Henri's 15%. I have a few thoughts on the Firekeeper that I'll save for the quarterfinals. Instead, I'm just gonna mourn the loss of Henri and Lucatiel. Henri is a very complicated character, but their storyline is technically the most well-crafted, with various knowledge checks being required to progress it. They lose their bestie Horace early on, they might get murdered so you can marry them, and their lore as a child kidnapped by Aldrich is insanely sad. Then there's Lucatiel. She is one of my favorite characters in the franchise. She starts off so badass with her mysterious mask and hat. She's got the skills to back up her words with that V for Vendetta energy, yet every time you meet her, she loses more and more of herself. She has me thinking about mortality and sense of self in a way that is both terrifying and endearing. Her name is Lucatiel. I beg of you, remember her name, for she may not herself. With the first round over, we've gone from 10 women, 6 men, and Henri, down to 3 women and 5 men with no Henri. The only man who got eliminated was Alexander, and the only women to survive were 2 level-up maidens and Rani. Meanwhile, Sekiro leaves the building with Emma's elimination, as does Dark Souls 2 with the Emerald Herald and Lucatiel both biting the bullet. How fascinating is it that as we whittle these NPCs down, suddenly the women are on the back foot as the men with these bombastic storylines press forwards? I'm not making any judgments here, by the way, people prefer what they prefer, I'm just intrigued to see how this continues. The quarterfinals begins with Sir Ansbach versus Rani the Witch. Ansbach is a bro, but Rani is just on another level popularity-wise, and that reflects with a 71% to 29% vote split. I don't even need to explain it. Ranni is a flawed individual who has schemed just like the rest of the Elden Ring cast, but she's also a cute doll character, and the internet has been weak for her for a millennia. Plus, her questline is actually really fun. Onto a more interesting battle. The Knights of Catarina are about to come to blows. Siegward versus Siegmeyer. I think the person you vote for in this matchup says a lot about what you value in an NPC. Siegmeyer by far has the most interesting personal narrative. He is constantly being helped whether he likes it or not by the chosen undead, unable to prove his own worth as a proud knight. This is a man who is slowly being chipped away by your kindness until the Lost Izalith sequence where he either meets his end or you stop him from his self-sacrifice, which eventually leads to him hollowing in Ashe Lake where his daughter finishes him off. This is my favorite quest in Dark Souls. It's dark, it's depressing, and it makes you rethink how your actions can affect people, and I do love a tragic NPC. Siegward, on the other hand, is a tried and true bestie who radiates positivity even in the darkest of circumstances. He has a very memorable entrance with an elevator, which leads to the encounter with the fire demon in the upper town. He's willing to get down and dirty with you, but never once does he hold your actions against you, instead toasting to your victories. If your idea of your favorite NPC is someone who will stand by you, fight alongside you, and ultimately have a positive impact on your experience, I can see why you would rather vote Siegward. And that reflects in the final vote count. Siegward wins the battle with 67% of the votes to Siegmeyer's 33%. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but with a lot of negativity in the world right now, people are just drawn to characters that make them happy. Siegmeyer is a bit of a Debbie Downer, whereas Siegward is more of a peppy patty. Let me know what you think of that theory down below. Blythe and Solaire are next. They both fill the same archetype down to their tragic endings, but one of them has been an icon for over 15 years, while the other has, again, hit his personal ceiling because I don't have enough furries in my audience. Solaire handily takes this with 74% of the vote to Blythe's 26%. I like the Wolfman. I think his armor is sick, his voice acting, oh my god, and his role in the story is fascinating, but he also feels a bit unfinished. Throwing him in the Everjail just to have him escape anyway felt like a really lazy way to continue his questline, whereas I've already mentioned, Solaire's quest is fully fleshed out by comparison. And only one of these two characters canonically flirts with you. Blythe fans, I know you think he does, but he really doesn't. And finally, we have the doll versus the Firekeeper. Now, I'm going to go there. I think both of these characters land this high in the polls because of their subservient nature. They both want what is best for the player character and will do anything within their power to make that happen. The difference here is that the doll is forced into this role by the Moon Presence and Gehrman. She doesn't really get a choice. Those moments where the mask cracks are so vital towards her character because it gives her depth. She is more than just this caring servant. Deep down, there is a personality there that is smothered and unable to shine. The Firekeeper wants to be that way though, which, look, there's nothing wrong with that, but when one of your main endings to the game involves a secret betrayal, I'd actually expect the Firekeeper to have an opinion on all of that, instead of her effectively saying, hey, if this is what you want me to do, then I'll do it for you, and if you change your mind, just kill me and take the eyes back. This is what kills that character for me personally. She doesn't have any depth unless you give her that depth, and even then you're just planting your own ideas in her head. But she is beloved in the community, and that is what we're here to find out. Not who Billy's favourite characters are, but who my viewers' favourite characters are. So color me surprised when I'm at D&D with some friends, and I check the poll results on my phone to screenshot them only to see they're at 50-50. My friends, we had a tiebreaker. And the only way to break that tie was to do a second poll that only lasted for 1 hour. At the end, whoever was leading would take the win, and by a single percentage, which then, after I had taken the screenshot, changed back to 50-50, our winner was The Doll with 51% to the Firekeeper's 49%. What a battle. And so we reach the top 4. 2 men and 2 women. Rani versus Sigvard, Solaire versus the Doll. The winners of the next 2 brackets go into the finals, while the losers battle it out for 3rd place. And each representative in this final 4 represents a different game in the series. Rani for Elden Ring, Sigvard for Dark Souls 3, Solaire for Dark Souls, and the Doll for Bloodborne. Were these your top 4, or did you expect some other characters to make it here? Let me know in the comments below. The semi-finals begins with Rani versus Sigvard, which feels like a rematch of Rani versus Alexander, as Sigvard fills a similar narrative role. The question is, can she overcome the Onion Knight to be in our top 2? The answer is no. By a vote of 58% to 42%, Sigvard of Katarina from Dark Souls 3 is your first finalist. Rani will instead be relegated to the 3rd place bracket, where she can still go for the bronze. Sigvard, meanwhile, is guaranteed at least a silver placement. There is at least one major Souls YouTuber preying on his downfall. You know who you are, so we'll see what happens in the finals. Then we move over to Solaire of Astora versus the Doll. Ever since we hit the 1v1 stage, Solaire has been dominating in these polls, but the Doll is the highest placing level up maiden. If anyone could take him out, she has a shot. And by a vote of 74% to 26%, Solaire of Astora is your second finalist, taking the Doll down and sending her into the 3rd place bracket. The upset did not happen. The Sunbro will, at the very least, be taking home the silver, which means we have an all-male final 2 and an all-female 3rd place fight. I think it's so interesting to look at the voting patterns and see how the first half of this entire project was dominated by the women doing amazingly, but how the men completely closed that gap once we started getting into the 1v1s. So let's give it up for Rani and the Doll as they fight for 3rd place. I'm writing this segment before I discover the results, and my guess is I think Rani is going to win. Not to say there's recency bias, because obviously Elden Ring is completely valid, but I do think I would be shocked if an Elden Ring character isn't in the top 3 after it dominated so much of the early game of this tournament. But if it was going to be any other character to take Rani out, I do think the Doll is as close as we'll get. The votes are probably going to be very close. So who gets 3rd place in my Soulsborne NPC Popularity Poll? As it turns out, I was right. By 61%, Rani claims the 3rd place bronze medal, leaving the Doll in 4th place with 39% of the votes. Congratulations to our Ice Queen, but now it's time for the final match. Sigvard of Katarina versus Solaire of Astora. The 2 titans who have dominated the entire competition, winning poll after poll and taking down everyone on their way. Only one of them can take home the title of the most popular NPC in Soulsborne, according to my community tab. Without further ado, by a vote of 63% to 37%, your winner is Solaire of Astora! Who could have seen that one coming? Fucking everyone. The man has an amiibo. Do any of the others have an amiibo? Sigvard gave him a great run for his money, but ultimately, Solaire is timeless and will continue to live on in the series forever. Ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, it seems Egon is cashing in his bail in the bank briefcase and challenging Solaire to a title match. Our Sunbro has only held this victory for a few short moments, and here is the man, the myth, the legend, Egon himself attempting to snatch it from his hands. One last poll. Egon versus Solaire. Egon's fans finally get to put their money where their mouth is, and in the end, Solaire fucking destroyed him. 76% to 24%. Egon was handily swept away under the waves of Sunny D emanating off of Solaire. One does not simply skip the whole tournament and profiteer. That is the ending you all chose. Egon fans, I hope you're happy with this. So what have we learned? There is a fan of every NPC, no matter how small. From the Basket Weaver Shosuke's to the Solaire's of Astora's. There is also a hater of every NPC, no matter how small. From the Divine Childs of the Rejuvenating Waters to the Siegfrieds of Katarina's. But what I know for sure is that these wonderful pieces of code have brought joy to the lives of many. Characters have the power to transcend media and lodge themselves deep in your arteries, where they will feed off of your joy until the inevitable heat death of the universe. Lucatiel should have won.